Mufasa, The Lion King, is a follow-up slash prequel to the 2019 Lion King remake, and it follows things in that continuity. There are some changes that movie made when it came to some of the characterization, so it's sort of building on that and adding a little more basis to those things, which were different from what the original movie in '94 did. But here, however, we follow the origin story of Mufasa, as he was a cub who lost his family at a very young age, and then eventually found a new family, including a brother named Taka. And this movie chronicles their journeys as they eventually become the characters that we get to know them as, while also dealing with a lot of trials and tribulations along the way. This story is being told, however, in the present by Rafiki to Simba and Nala's daughter, Kiara. Now, Simba and Nala are off doing something else, and while the movie is going on, Rafiki, Timon, and Pumbaa are taking care of Kiara as she's learning about her grandfather. So it's a sequel in that sense, in that it also sprinkles in aspects of Simba's Pride and Lion King 1.5, with Timon and Pumbaa telling the story and eventually cutting back to them at some points of time, while also bringing in Kiara as a character and setting her up for whatever might come down the line. But also it acts as a prequel for a story that we've not really seen before, and so there's a lot of things that they could expand on over there. Earlier in the year, my family and I did a video about the original Lion King movie, about how special that is to this particular household, and how 30 years later it still manages to leave a mark. And so The Lion King is something that's very special to me. It means a lot to me, and it's something that I've talked about extensively. And so maybe in that sense I'm a little more judgmental when it comes to something about The Lion King. Like Simba's Pride and 1.5, those aren't bad by any means, but I don't like them nearly as much as the original film. And the 2019 remake is one that I have actually come to dislike more and more in the time since. At the time I said it was okay, but at this point of time I don't think I can actually watch the remake. I just really don't enjoy that experience overall. This movie was directed by Barry Jenkins, who directed Moonlight in 2016, which ended up winning Best Picture. He also directed the excellent If Beale Street Could Talk, which I feel is a very underseen movie by many. And he also did an excellent job with the Underground Railroad on Prime. So this is not just some other director. This is someone who is very much established and has done an excellent job in telling the stories that he has in the time that he has been at the forefront of things in the industry. However, this is his first movie since If Beale Street Could Talk, and it's a very interesting switch because I feel like everybody had the same reaction when they heard Barry Jenkins was making a live-action Disney movie, which is really? And I will say this about Mufasa, even if it's a low bar to cross, it is better than the 2019 version. Of those movies, I would say this is definitely a step up from that. And I think a lot of that has to do with Barry Jenkins every now and then getting to work with some really unique ideas, making the most out of the canvas that he's been offered, which in this case is pretty much entirely CGI, with, the animals being given photorealistic treatments, which is astonishingly good. The CGI in this movie, much like the remake version, is remarkable. It's hard to sometimes tell what's not real because most of it has this really insane uncanny valley effect to it, and it is very, very good. Like, the visual effects artists have done a really great job with these two movies, and so I do have to commend them on that. And they've added a bit more life to this version, because one of the big critiques about the 2019 version is that the characters didn't have a lot of emotional range. There is still limitations in Mufasa, but there's a little more going on, and there's a little bit more when it comes to, the humor that they have and some of the reactions that they have to things. They've tried to morph it a little bit to be able to let those come through. And so I think they did a decent job of making some of that still have an effect. And I think when it comes to some of the visual storytelling moments, when it comes to some of the imagery that is being worked with in terms of, what the characters are seeing and what they're sort of imagining in their heads, which happens pretty often when it comes to this idea of what is past a certain point, I think they did a very good job with that, and I think Barry Jenkins in those moments really gets to work with some interesting ideas. That also comes through when it comes to some of the dynamic between Mufasa and Taka. Obviously, you know what happens with these characters, but to see how they eventually, get there, But to see how they get there and, first start off as two brothers who care for each other, who have, met under these excruciating circumstances, and now they've started to have a legitimate connection. To see that build and to sort of see the sprinkles of how each character becomes the version of themselves, I thought they handled some of that nicely, and the voice performances from Aaron Pierre and Kelvin Harrison Jr. did a very good job of making a lot of that work. The music from Lin-Manuel Miranda, for the most part, is fine. There was a couple of great songs in here, and I think they did a really, really good job with those. There's a couple of standouts just definitely when it comes to the music in terms of the songs, but in terms of the score, not so much. In fact, most memorable moments with the score are the bits that were from Hans Zimmer from the original score, and then also the 2019 remake. It's sort of building on those themes again, and even though the score's not too bad, it's composed by Dave Metzger, who did the Broadway musical, I believe, and he also did Wish last year, the Disney movie. I would say the score's okay, but it's just one of those things where you'll end up remembering the motifs that he used from Hans Zimmer's work way more than you will, whatever is new in this movie. At least that was my estimate, my perception of it. I don't know if everyone else will feel the same way, but that's just something that I did walk away with. I would say the first half of the movie is actually not too bad, especially when it comes to everything with the younger versions of Mufasa and Taka, and then eventually the conflict that arises when Kiros, voiced by Mads Mikkelsen, comes in order to take over everything. That stuff is very fascinating, and there are some really great moments over there. But once we're past that point a little bit and it becomes this long journey movie where eventually Mufasa and Taka meet familiar characters along the way like Rafiki, Sarabi, and Zazu, it becomes sort of this, connection point to, where we're going with this, and there are a lot of points where it starts to repeat a few beats from the original movie, especially when it comes to this one sequence which involves a very, tense situation. And I feel like when you see that, the way it plays out, you're like, okay, I see what the parallel they're trying to do is. And there are a lot of moments like that where the movie will just have a character do something and it's a very direct parallel to something that you see eventually. Like something that even, I was watching it with my mom, for example, like even she pointed out, like there's a couple of moments over there where Taka does something and that is important because later on that character does the exact same thing in the future storyline. And so some of that, definitely does impact the storytelling a little bit. And those are parts where I feel like Barry Jenkins doesn't have much to do. And those are the parts of the movie that make the movie suffer. And so while I did enjoy that first half, by the second half, it was definitely losing its way for me. And there were a lot of aspects of it that felt very rushed. I've been saying Taka all along, but most people know he's Scar. So how he's going to end up becoming the character that we know him as. But the decision point for that, moment where he goes from being who he is to Scar is very rushed. And surprisingly, there's not a lot of weight to it. It's a very drop in a bucket sort of decision, and I'm not really sure how I felt about that because it doesn't really make much sense. Like that being the motivation for everything that happens, it doesn't feel as strong or even as simple as just the idea that he was supposed to be king and then Simba was born and then he lost his birthright. This idea, which was in the original movie, that's something that's not in this remake. And so just to be able to in the continuity of the remake, and so to kind of lose that and go with the motivation that is in this, that doesn't really work for me. I don't know how everyone else is gonna feel about it though, but that was my takeaway from it. And so overall, when it came to Mufasa the Lion King, there were some solid things in there, and there were some things that I liked, and I do think this is better than the remake version from 2019, absolutely. But it also isn't a perfect movie. There's a lot of issues that I have with it, and unfortunately, I still don't think it's particularly great. So I would say this is probably going to end up being the outlier in Barry Jenkins' filmography. He is going to make a bunch of movies after this, which are going to be, like 5 to 6 indie projects, some things that he really wants to make, passion projects. But I guess in that sense, it's a success. But as it stands, this is one of those movies where I think it could have been a lot better at points. I think it is, again, better than I expected it to be, but still not as great as I think it could have been. I'm gonna give Mufasa the Lion King a 6.5 out of 10. I know what you're thinking. That's the exact same rating I gave to the 2019 version back in the day. I would not give it that rating now. That rating considerably drops for me in the time since. I can't watch that remake particularly anymore. It's just not for me at all. And so, yeah, I'm a little harsher towards that in the present. This one, however, okay. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.